You notice him at 7:42 in the morning because he is blocking the oat milk at the grocery store. You see faded jeans, a navy sweatshirt with a bleach mark near the cuff, and grey New Balance shoes that look like they have survived 6 winters and 1 divorce. You watch him hold 2 cartons of eggs like the price is a personal insult. You assume he is thinking about rent, gas, or whether blueberries at $5.99 can be justified. You follow him into the parking lot by accident because your car is 3 spaces from his. You watch him load 2 paper bags into the back seat of a 2008 Toyota Camry with 1 missing hubcap and a crack crawling across the windshield like frozen lightning. You get into your leased SUV with stitched leather seats and a payment that makes your stomach tighten. You look over one more time and see him checking a voicemail. You hear him say, "Tell them I'm not selling under 48 million." You freeze with your hand on the start button. You feel your brain reject the evidence because it does not match the costume. You want it to arrive in black cars, polished watches, private dining rooms, and shoes that never touch rainwater. You want rich people to look rich because it makes the world feel readable. You want the game to have uniforms. You want the man with $48 million on the phone to have the decency to dress like your fantasy of success. You want the millionaire to perform for you. You want the billionaire to glow in the dark. You want the heir to wear a crest so you can hate cleanly. You have been sold the bedtime story that rich people drive old cars because they are humble. You have been fed the cute little myth that wealthy people wear cheap watches because they are frugal. You have heard the recycled line about the billionaire eating a hot dog and driving a 10-year-old sedan, and you nodded like you had discovered wisdom. You discovered marketing for people who want to feel morally superior while still fantasizing about being rich. You were handed a cartoon. You were told the rich hide their money because they are modest, disciplined, grounded, and allergic to vanity. You were not told that visible wealth is expensive. You were not told that attention has a carrying cost. You were not told that every shiny object becomes a signal, every signal becomes a request, every request becomes a drain, and every drain becomes a tax you never see. You see an old car and think simplicity. You see a plain shirt and think humility. You see a $38 haircut and think character. You are missing the machinery behind the curtain. You are watching the costume and ignoring the strategy. You think the game is about having money. You do not understand that the next level is controlling who knows you have it. You get a raise from $62,000 to $91,000, and suddenly your cousin remembers a business idea involving vending machines. You post a vacation photo from a hotel balcony, and suddenly the friend who never texts asks if you can float $1,800 until Friday. You buy a used German car for $31,500, and suddenly your father says it must be nice to have disposable income while mentioning his dental bill. You wear one nice watch to dinner, and the waiter recommends the $180 bottle instead of the $58 bottle without blinking. You reveal a little breathing room, and someone immediately decides they deserve to breathe through it. You do not need to be rich for this to happen. You only need to appear slightly richer than the people around you. You only need to make the mistake of looking comfortable. You think money gives you freedom. You are half right. You think visible money gives you respect. You are dangerously wrong. Visible money gives people instructions. It tells the taxman where to look. It tells the salesperson how hard to squeeze. It tells your family where to lean. It tells your friends what you can afford to ignore. It tells strangers what you might be worth taking from. It tells employees what you can pay. It tells vendors what number to invent. It tells litigators whether the hunt is worth the ammunition. You think this is eccentric. You think this is humility. You are still romanticizing. You are still trying to turn strategy into virtue because it makes the story easier to swallow. You do not want to admit that appearing ordinary can save more money than appearing brilliant can make. You do not want to admit that the richest person in the room often dresses like the one person who has already calculated what proof costs. You need to understand the tax angle first because it is the least emotional and the most brutal. You have been trained to think taxes happen in April. You imagine a form, a deadline, a refund, missing receipts, and an accountant with tired eyes. At a certain level, taxes are not an event. They are weather. They are architecture. They shape how money moves before it ever touches a checking account. They decide whether wealth appears as salary, equity, debt, appreciation, trusts, partnerships, retained earnings, or a quiet line in a balance sheet. You think income is money. Rich people know income is exposure. You brag about making $180,000 because you spent years wishing someone would pay you like a serious person. You want the number to validate you. You want the number to sit in your mortgage application, your dating profile energy, your family mythology. A wealthy person hears high income and thinks high visibility. You get a W-2 for $650,000 and feel powerful until you see how many hands were waiting in the hallway. You see federal taxes, state taxes, city taxes, payroll taxes, Medicare surtaxes, property taxes, luxury taxes, estate concerns, and compliance bills. You realize the system loves income because income is easy to see. You realize the system punishes the dollar that walks through the front door wearing a name tag. You buy a $140,000 car in a city where public databases, parking valets, nosy neighbors, insurance companies, and divorce attorneys can all interpret the signal. You renovate the front of your house with imported stone, and the county reassesses your property like it has been waiting outside with a clipboard. You put your name on a building, and every charity within 30 miles discovers your mailbox. You sell a company and let the number leak, and suddenly your life becomes a public menu. You think rich people avoid flashing money because they do not care. You should consider that they care enough to avoid triggering systems designed to attach themselves to visible abundance. You hear a founder takes a salary of $72,000 from a company worth 9 figures, and you think humility explains it. You do not understand that assets can be borrowed against, gains can be deferred, equity can be held, ownership can be routed, distributions can be timed. You see the modest paycheck and think that person is one of the people. You are wrong. You think wealth is what gets deposited every 2 Fridays. You think wealth is the number on a pay stub. You do not understand that real wealth hides in ownership, not spending. The upper class often conceal consumption because they are tired of being targeted, taxed, negotiated against, or emotionally invoiced by everyone around them. You call it frugality because the word feels clean. You call it minimalism because the word belongs in magazines with pale wood furniture. You call it humility because humility makes rich people less offensive to you. The harder truth is that every visible upgrade creates a trail. You put a $22,000 watch on your wrist, and it does not just tell time. It tells the dealer you can be upsold. It tells the contractor you do not need the lower estimate. It tells the plaintiff's lawyer there may be meat on the bone. It tells your employees that the company is doing better than you said in the compensation meeting. It tells your sibling that you could have helped more with the roof. It tells your friend that dinner should be on you. It tells everyone around you a story they will use against you in a way that feels reasonable to them. You will say this sounds paranoid. You will say normal people do not think like this. You will say relationships should not work that way. You are describing how you wish the world worked. You are not describing the world. You already know this because you have done it too. You have judged someone's generosity by their shoes. You have looked at someone's house and decided their problems were smaller than yours. You have seen a friend order expensive wine and quietly reduced your sympathy. You have heard someone complain about stress after posting vacation photos and thought, please. You have taxed people socially in your head. You just did not send an invoice. This is the second cost, and it is nastier than the government because it arrives wrapped in love. You can budget for the IRS. You cannot budget for the cousin who says you're the only one doing well. You cannot budget for the old friend who starts every request with, I hate to ask. You cannot budget for the parent who sees your savings account as a correction to an entire life of bad decisions. You cannot budget for the resentment that arrives when you stop struggling publicly. You think people want you to succeed? They do, up to a point. You buy a house for $1.4 million and suddenly a childhood friend cannot tell you about a rent increase without hearing bitterness enter the room. You send your kid to a private school that costs $38,000 a year and your sister says, must be nice, with the exact tone people use when they mean betrayal. You mention you are tired, and someone says you'd be tired too if you had real problems. You become less human in direct proportion to how comfortable you appear. You are allowed to be stressed when your car has warning lights. You are not allowed to be stressed when your garage has 3 doors. You are allowed to be lonely in a studio apartment. You are not allowed to be lonely behind a gate. You are accused of being ungrateful at $470,000 a year. You think this is a fair trade until you experience it. You think you would gladly accept resentment with the money. You think that because you are imagining anonymous comments from strangers, not quiet disappointment from people you love. You are imagining haters, not your brother looking at you like you became management in the family business of suffering. You show up to Thanksgiving in a $240 sweater instead of the $2,400 one because you do not want the mashed potatoes served with class warfare. You park the nicer car 3 blocks away because you do not want your uncle doing math in the driveway. You tell people business is fine when it is printing money because fine ends the conversation and great starts a trial. You pay for dinner 3 times and you are expected. You stop on the 4th time and you are cheap. You become a solution with legs. You become the emergency fund for people who never asked whether you wanted the job. That is why serious money learns camouflage. Not always because it is noble. Often because it is exhausted. You may think this makes rich people cold. Sometimes it does. You should still be honest enough to admit that people become guarded after enough hands reach toward them. You should be honest enough to admit that visibility attracts need, the way porch lights attract insects in July. You should be honest enough to admit that if every good month in your life created 12 new requests, you would start calling good months fine too. Then comes safety, and this is the part polite people hate discussing because it sounds ugly. You want to believe the world is basically civilized. You want to believe danger belongs in bad neighborhoods, late nights, and news clips you can turn off. You want to believe your lifestyle signals taste, not vulnerability. You are wrong again. Visible wealth does not only attract envy, it attracts inventory. You become a list of items: the watch, the car, the ring, the handbag, the house, the kids' school, the predictable coffee shop at 8:10 a.m., the vacation schedule posted in real time because you could not resist showing the infinity pool. You think you are sharing your life. Someone else may be mapping your routine. You think the $18,000 watch says you made it. Someone else sees how fast the clasp opens. You think the gated house says security. Someone else sees delivery patterns, landscaping schedules, and which upstairs lights turn off at night. You think the exotic car is a reward. Someone else sees an address, a plate number, an insurance profile, and a person who probably keeps expensive things nearby. It is not dramatic to the people who have had the black SUV follow them 2 exits too long. It is not dramatic to the woman who stopped wearing her engagement ring to the grocery store after a stranger stared at her hand through the frozen aisle. You tag locations, you post interiors, you announce absence. You show the wine room, the garage, the school crest, the dog's name, the birth month, the vacation house, the front gate, and the view from the bedroom. You wonder why the truly rich post nothing except a blurry photo of a tree twice a year. This is why the richest people in certain rooms look aggressively average. You see a plain black jacket and assume middle management. You do not see the driver waiting on a side street. You see a canvas tote and assume practicality. You do not see the family office approving capital calls before lunch. You see an old pickup truck outside a ranch and assume country simplicity. You do not see the mineral rights, land options, water access, LLCs, conservation easements, and the lawyer billing $900 an hour to make sure nobody knows which parcel belongs to whom. You are trained to notice the visible object. You are not trained to notice the invisible structure. That ignorance makes you easy to impress. It also makes you easy to manipulate. You are dazzled by leased cars and blind to paid-off assets. You are dazzled by hotel lobbies and blind to equity stakes. You are dazzled by the person buying shots and blind to the one quietly acquiring the building. You are dazzled by anyone who looks rich because you still think wealth is a costume party. The rich who survive long enough stop dressing for applause and start dressing for risk management. They do not want the valet remembering the car. They do not want the server repeating the tip. They do not want the neighbor knowing the remodel budget. They do not want the contractor assuming there is no ceiling. They do not want the school parent connecting the dots. They do not want the internet finding the children. They do not want to be a headline, a target, a wallet, a symbol, or a convenient villain in someone else's story. You may resent that. You may call it paranoia. You may say that if you had money, you would enjoy it. You probably would at first. You would enjoy it loudly because loud enjoyment is what people without money imagine money is for. You would upgrade the car before the paperwork cooled. You would buy the watch you have stared at for 3 years. You would book the suite because the word still does something to your nervous system. You would post the view. You would post the key card. You would perform arrival because you have been waiting to arrive. Then you would notice the shift. You would notice the old friend who now lets you pay. You would notice the new friend who laughs too hard. You would notice the cousin who calls every time life catches fire. You would notice the contractor's second estimate after seeing your kitchen. You would notice the charity invitations. You would notice strangers staring at the watch. You would notice your children being evaluated by adults with hungry eyes. You would notice the cost of being known. Then you would learn to disappear. Not completely, just enough. You would keep the assets and mute the evidence. You would stop wearing the watch in airports. You would stop posting in real time. You would stop telling people numbers. You would stop saying we bought and start saying we found a place. You would stop saying our portfolio and start saying things are okay. You would stop using the language of victory because victory makes people gather. You would stop giving the world handles to grab. This brings you to the information game, which is the most ruthless part because it rewards people who can tolerate being underestimated. You hate being underestimated because you still need status to soothe you. You still want the room to know you are not small. You still want the salesman to recognize your spending power. You still want the hostess to seat you properly. You still want the banker to stop using the beginner voice. You still want your old classmates to know you were not a loser. You still want strangers to see the external proof of your internal argument. The wealthy who understand the game let people be wrong. They let the salesman ignore them. They let the banker underestimate them. They let the negotiation start low. They let the other side reveal assumptions. They let arrogance leak from the mouths of people who think they are dealing with someone weaker. They sit in the fleece vest and collect information. You think being underestimated is disrespect. They know it is a discount. You walk into a dealership dressed to impress, and you tell the room you came to be harvested. You walk in wearing the expensive watch, the branded belt, and the sunglasses with the logo big enough to read from space, and every person in the building knows you want to be treated like a winner. You are not buying a car anymore. You are buying confirmation. That is why you are easy to close. The person with real leverage shows up boring. You cannot tell whether the car is affordable or not. The salesperson has to work. The manager has to reveal numbers. The finance office cannot immediately smell vanity. The negotiation stays about the object instead of your ego. You see the same thing in business. You walk into a meeting and announce success too early, and the room prices you accordingly. You mention funding, revenue, investor names, expansion plans, and growth, and you think you are building credibility. Sometimes you are. Sometimes you are just raising the cost of everything you are about to buy. Your landlord hears growth and increases rent. Your vendor hears funding and removes discounts. Your employees hear profitability and recalibrate loyalty into compensation pressure. Your competitors hear momentum and start copying, blocking, poaching, or whispering. Your clients hear capacity and demand more for the same price. Viability changes the market around you. You think information is neutral. It is not. Information is ammunition. Every number you reveal can be used to price you, pressure you, flatter you, sue you, recruit you, shame you, or corner you. Rich people learn to give less away. Not because mystery is stylish, because mystery preserves optionality. You do not need to lie. You just need to stop volunteering weapons. You do not need to pretend to be broke. You just need to stop performing liquidity. You do not need to wear rags. You just need to stop dressing like a receipt. You do not need to hide every success. You just need to understand that every disclosed success creates expectations you may not want to service. This is where the fake humility story collapses. The old car is not always humility. Sometimes it is a shield. The plain house from the street is not always modesty. Sometimes the back opens into 9,000 square feet you will never see. The cheap watch is not always frugality. Sometimes the $180 Casio is what gets worn when no conversation with watch people is desired. The basic profile is not always lack of achievement. Sometimes it is deliberate absence of bait. The quiet rich are not quiet because they lack ego. Some do. Many just have a more expensive understanding of consequences. You want to believe money makes people free from caring what others think. In reality, money often forces people to care with more precision. You care whether people think you are impressive. They care whether people think they are extractable. You care whether you look successful. They care whether they look worth suing. You care whether the table respects you. They care whether the table leaves them alone. You care whether the world sees your rise. They care whether the world can find the children. That is the gap. That is why your idea of rich behavior is usually just poor fantasy with better lighting. You imagine the rich flexing because you would flex. You imagine the rich buying approval because you still crave approval. You imagine the rich enjoying attention because you have not had enough attention to know how quickly it turns into a job. You are not imagining wealth, you are imagining relief from shame. You are imagining the day you can make everyone who dismissed you regret it. You are imagining walking into the room and watching faces change. That fantasy is human. It is also immature. The longer money stays in a family, the quieter it often becomes. The first generation buys the car, the second generation buys the gate, the third generation buys privacy. The first generation wants proof. The second generation wants access. The third generation wants nobody to know the last name. You can see the evolution in one parking lot. You see the new money guy in the bright car with ceramic brakes and a vanity plate that tries too hard. You see the corporate climber in the luxury SUV still smelling like debt and ambition. You see the old money woman in the dented station wagon with a dog blanket in the back and an account large enough to make the dealership owner stand up straight. You laugh at the wagon because you are visually illiterate. You think she has fallen behind. She owns the road you are trying to impress people on. You cannot understand invisible wealth because invisible wealth denies you the emotional satisfaction of ranking people quickly. You want the person in the cheap jacket to be below you because your own jacket costs $600 and your credit card still remembers. If the old Camry can contain a person negotiating $48 million, then your leased SUV is not evidence. You work until 7:15 p.m. under fluorescent lights, then spend $230 on dinner to feel like the person the job is supposedly turning you into. You choose the apartment with the lobby that smells like eucalyptus because you want visitors to understand before they reach your door. You finance the car because walking into places as a person with a nice car feels better than telling the truth about your savings. You call it lifestyle. Often it is costume rental. You are not buying quality. You are buying a temporary escape from being misread as average. Meanwhile, the person you think is average moves through the world with less friction because nobody knows where to attach the hook. You are out here shining like bait. You cannot hear this without getting defensive because the whole economy depends on your defensiveness. Luxury brands need you wounded, car companies need you insecure, real estate marketers need you terrified of looking behind. Restaurants need you to confuse price with importance. Social media needs you to turn your life into evidence. Your ego needs you to believe that if people can see your success, then your success becomes more real. The truly wealthy learn that the most valuable parts of life do not improve when more people know about them. The paid-off house does not become more secure because strangers admire it. The brokerage account does not compound faster because followers clap. The land does not produce more because you posted the gate. The trust does not protect more because your cousin understands it. The freedom does not deepen because your ex sees the hotel. You keep confusing being watched with winning. Sometimes being watched is the bill. There is another layer you do not want to hear. Some rich people pretend to be poor because it lets them keep exploiting the moral advantages of appearing ordinary. You like the idea that understated rich people are automatically good. Do not be childish. A billionaire in a hoodie can still crush a supplier. A landlord in an old pickup can still raise rents without blinking. A founder who flies coach can still underpay employees while talking about culture. A man who clips coupons can still lobby for rules that make him richer. Plain clothes do not equal clean hands. A cheap watch does not absolve anyone. You should simply learn to see the game without needing fairy tales. The game is that rich people separate control from display. They limit information because information changes pricing. You can stop announcing every raise. You can stop posting every upgrade. You can stop dressing for people who do not affect your life. You can stop revealing your budget before a negotiation. You can stop turning success into a group discussion. You can stop giving people live access to your movements. You can stop letting your ego leak data. You can learn to say less. You can learn to enjoy privately. You have been trained like a casino machine with a front-facing camera. You will discover a different kind of power when you stop feeding the room so much information. Privacy is where leverage accumulates without being interrupted by applause. The final paradox is simple, and it should bother you. The people with the most money often spend enormous effort making sure you cannot tell. They hide wealth not because money is meaningless, but because money becomes more useful when it is not constantly explaining itself. They hide wealth because the world charges admission to anyone who looks like they can pay. They hide wealth because love gets complicated when numbers are visible. They hide wealth because safety changes when strangers can estimate net worth from across a parking lot. They hide wealth because negotiation favors the person who reveals less. They hide wealth because status is loudest right before it becomes a trap. You see the man from the grocery store again 2 months later at 6:18 p.m. You watch him stand under the awning while rain darkens the shoulders of his jacket. You watch a younger man in a tailored suit rush up with the nervous energy of someone about to ask for money. You see the younger man smile too wide. You see the door held open. You see respect performed with both hands. You realize the old man was never invisible to the people who mattered. He was only invisible to people like you. They are known to bankers, lawyers, partners, trustees, operators, brokers, heirs, buyers, sellers, and the quiet machinery that moves real money around the world. They do not need mass recognition because mass recognition is a low-quality currency. You chase symbols because structure is harder to build than image. The real divide is whether you need wealth to be seen in order to feel real. The real divide is whether you control the signal or the signal controls you. The real divide is whether money buys freedom or recruits an audience. You can keep performing if you want. You can keep dressing insecurity in premium fabrics. You can keep sending little press releases from your life to people too distracted to care and too jealous to be happy. You can keep pretending the world owes recognition because the props improved. Or you can learn the colder art. You can build quietly. You can stop handing people the knife and acting shocked when they cut into your piece. You can become harder to price, harder to pressure, harder to manipulate, and harder to turn into a story. That is why rich people pretend to be poor. The world is a machine that notices prices, taxes, flatters, resents, targets, and extracts. Until you understand the difference, you will keep polishing the cage and calling it freedom.